everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Articulating Insight podcast. The second one, in fact, and the first one I have with a guest. And a very cool guest I have indeed. It is Josh, also known as the Prankster, and he's also called himself Hollis Frampton, or framptonhollis. No, not actually the experimental filmmaker. He just, it's a tribute. He made a little tribute. And, that was my guess. So just some guy I found through a friend who found his YouTube channel and thought his videos were crazy, and they are. Check out the Prankster. He's got crazy, cool montages, just whacked out stuff on there. It's awesome. It's really cool. I highly recommend checking it out. And I thought, I just added him on Discord a while ago and never really got a chance to talk to him. It just didn't come up after I had first added him. And I just thought this would be a great opportunity for someone I thought about who would probably have a really unique perspective. And he did, absolutely. And another thing that was quite serendipitous was he likes to talk, absolutely. And I don't think you'd take that as an insult. He admits it himself in the episode. He just goes off. Like, I was kind of nervous because this is like my first episode having a guest on the podcast. And I got in the call with him, and then I was just like, hey, man, how's it going? It's going good. And I was like, oh, yeah, we're just going to do this podcast thing. And then, boom, like, we basically got right into where the podcast starts, just right off the bat. And he didn't any prompting or anything. It was just off, and it was great. Unfortunately, in some ways, we ended up with a lot of footage. I think we recorded about 2 hours for the original podcast, and as you can see from the length of this, it's cut down a fair bit. And including this intro, etc. So I cut it down a bit, and most of what I cut was this really great but really long and specific, specifically Strozek, the Werner Herzog film, and about like David Lynch's Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks: The Return of Mulholland Drive. Just this really in-depth analysis of them that is great. And if you want that footage, if you're interested in this episode or whatever, comment it, feel free to hit me up or anything, and I'd be willing to post it. But just with what I wanted to accomplish with this episode, I wanted to keep it just in general with this podcast, I want to keep it general. Like, I want to keep it, for the most part, because that's the kind of thing about this episode that I feel like I should warn about, is that we do get really specific about a lot of films, but overall, I want to focus on insights that anyone can kind of internalize and think about logically with regards to art. But yeah, so like I was saying, with this episode, we do specifically, I'll give a list of films we kind of get deeper into. So we talk about Science Sono's Love Exposure, John Cassavetes' Woman Under the Influence, Seven Samurai, I mean, you know who it's by, films of Robert Altman, like mainly Nashville and Three Women. We're getting a big 2001 conversation, Buffalo 66, and Blue Velvet. So if you're unfamiliar with all those films, I have a feeling this episode could be a little difficult for you. And not trying to be like, oh, you might not be smart enough. No, it's more like we get into specifics about these films in a way that could be kind of hard to engage with if you're unfamiliar with them. So I hope you don't turn off the podcast, because I do want to talk about general terms, and we do get there. We absolutely get there, and I think there are insights to be taken from each of our conversations. But mainly, I just want to focus on the fact that this was a bit of an episode where I had to adapt to a different kind of style than I necessarily wanted to take the podcast in, but I was glad for it, because I invited Josh here as a guest, and I'm totally willing to talk about whatever he wants to talk about, because I'm open to those sort of things. And I think it turned out great. I think we got a really cool episode here. And, I'll give a little, hindsight on after editing the podcast, which I've already done at this point, about the 2001 conversation we have, because we do go really deep on it. And it's hard to have, like, a conversation where two people are coming from differing perspectives and trying to have, like, an articulate back and forth about it. So Josh does use this kind of really flowery, grandiose language when talking about it, which is, like, I'm sure is absolutely how he feels about it, but it's tough for me to kind of parse a bit. So I feel like that was just kind of a struggle to kind of get to kind of find a way of conversing where we could kind of compromise there. but I'm glad he was so enthusiastic about it and so willing to just hash it all out, because that's really my main point with the 2001 thing, is that I've had an experience in the past where I try to talk about it with people and they just kind of shut down and treat it like this holy object that it can't be critiqued and isn't allowed to be questioned. Which, I mean, obviously shouldn't be, like, you shouldn't act like that about anything. You should be willing to talk about anything. Um, a point I'd like to elaborate on that I make this connection between 2001 and Uncut Gems that, like, in the moment I was like, I got it. I found the key. It's all laid out in front of me. I got the fucking code here. In hindsight, when I was listening back to it, I don't think it's as clear as I want it to be. So I'm just gonna kind of elaborate that I'm just comparing the central metaphor of the monolith in 2001 to, like, as like the monolith is this kind of intangible force driving humanity. I compare that to the central metaphor of Uncut Gems, where Howard and the opal act as this sort of inspiration that kind of transcends mortality or whatever. So I was just trying to connect the monolith to the opal, and like to Howard in that way, the way Howard's connected to the opal. And it's something that Josh Safdie talks about a lot in interviews. That was kind of why I wanted to bring that up. And just as an example of how I am receptive to themes that are in 2001, I was just thinking that my problems were with the way it expresses itself. So I was just using that as a point of comparison. So that'll make sense later, hopefully. I mean, it might still not make sense later. But I don't know. Hopefully that little, just laying it out like that might help something. I don't know. And I think, oh yeah, I also want to say that by the end of this podcast, I think we really do hit like this great conversational stride. And it's hard when you're calling someone, like I said, like this is like the first time I called him, and we get just a little quick back and forth, and then we're boom right into the fucking podcast. So like it's tough to get right into like that back and forth. So there is we don't quite get to that sort of conversational level till kind of the end. But I recommend that you stick it out because there's great insights on the way. Josh's just absolute passion for all the things he talks about, and really like enthusiastic personality. It's just great. So, but yeah, stick around to the end. And we also do hit on some pretty general points that I think are really universally applicable for any sort of creative types, or even people that are I mean, I guess I think in some ways everyone's a creative type in terms of how they engage with stuff, and especially with the stuff we talked about at the end about the difference between perfect and good, and what should be strived for. And the answer may not be what you think. So stick around to the end of the podcast. But I want to keep this short because the episode's so long. It's going to be such a long episode, but I think it's worth it. I edited it down. So, like, yeah, obviously the first episode was just one take, front to back, me talking, because I can only talk for an hour, not even. I resort to random shit at the end. But this one is pretty cut down. So if you notice kind of weird speech jumps and stuff, which I'm sure there are because I'm not a professional audio editor by any means, I bet you that's just something where we got off on a bit of a tangent or got really specific about things where I just felt it didn't really flow with the episode. So I really hope it didn't misconstrue anything Josh said. I'm going to run this draft by him first before publishing it, obviously, and just to make sure there was nothing like out of context or anything. But yeah, I did cut it down. And I hope you enjoy this episode of me talking with Josh on the Articulating Insight podcast.
I would say the thing I most value in a piece of art, no matter what it is, and this is gonna not really be like a mind-blowing thing, but it's creativity,
Yeah.
pure and simple. I I kind of just will enjoy. I mean, I won't enjoy anything on the basis of it being creative,
Mm-hmm.
but that I can't usually really praise something if I don't really see any creativity in it at all. All my favorite films or music, almost all of it has some degree of creativity or something there, in between the spaces even that really says something, even if it wasn't intentional. It just has some kind of a thing to say to me, I feel almost. So I'm not like super trained in any real medium. The main thing I do is writing, and I used to do a lot of stuff with video, and I'm gonna get back into that, but I just don't have a camera now. But the thing I always try to do is just like think and just have ideas. And when you have enough ideas and they all come together to create this like big mammoth idea, this concept, even if it's a thesis that's clumsy and falls apart easily, even if some of the parts are weak, like if you really have even a modicum of a clue of the kind of power that you possess when you have nothing, and what you can do to really like stir yourself up, to really like get that spur of the moment, like lightning in a bottle, like idea just out there in any way. I just encourage that for everyone. You like, I have a very like sometimes very sentimental view of art. Like it's just like looking at it with like childlike eyes. It's like seeing the world for the first time, but in a new way. Like that's something that it is potential, to happen with anything, with any kind of music,
Hmm.
with any kind of film. And I listened to uh, something by the composer Morton Feldman. It's called For Bunita Marcus.
All right.
Uh, it's like a long, really like I modern classical composition, and it's all on the piano and one person playing the piano. And it's very like sparse. There's not a lot of, even though it's long, it's a long piece and it's not even close to the longest thing he's done. It's like an hour and a half, I think.
Hmm.
But the longest stuff he's done, it'll go on probably upwards to like 6, 7 hours. And this piece though is only one instrument. It's only listening to this piano recording. And what really makes it special are all the pauses, all the thought between every note, and then when you hear the next one, it's just like for some reason it opens up this new gateway into like memories and just seeing some kind of vague image of what's being spoken about without any words, with hardly any noise or sound. It's really interesting. And the exact opposite of that, to me, is almost equally as powerful. Like, one of my favorite movies is Love Exposure. I love that movie to death. The director, Shion Sono, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I've seen a number of his movies. Sometimes he might need a little bit of quality control, but for the most part, his films are very liberating and very unique, eclectic in styles and bursting with color and vibrance and energy. And that I really just like that. I just love seeing something on the screen just like overwhelm me with energy and movement, you know?
Hmm.
Even really simple things. It's very important when you're seeing a motion picture for it to really move in some kind of a way. I was watching like there's a scene in John Cassavetes' movie, Woman Under the Influence,
Hmm.
where uh, so the main character is played by Peter Falk, and he's like a construction worker, and he had to work all night, and he has all of his construction buddies like go over to his house. His wife, played by Gina Rollins, has to make them like something for breakfast. She makes some spaghetti, and when they're all like at the table eating spaghetti, it's very like spontaneous. All the actors, a lot of them, other than the two leads, seem to be possibly amateur actors, and there's a very improvisational mood to a lot of the John Cassavetes films.
Hmm.
Sometimes he'll like, move the camera in a certain way that's decidedly not super smooth. The films were shot on a very low budget. They're some of the first like really like marketed as independent movies, like movies that were made.
Hmm.
And there's often an improvisational feel because there's a very strong current of realism. And what I was seeing with that was there's not a lot happening on the screen. There's not a lot happening in the context of the film, at least not yet. And yet I was completely entranced in the moment. I felt exactly like I was there, and that this is the kind of movement you would see. This is the kind of action, and just everything between, even just between the words and the lines of dialogue, just looking into a character or an actor's eyes, even an extra can add something to a scene. It's all about this like huge picture
And even like the
that
way that
eventually gets
scene in
made.
particular flows, where it goes from her having like a joyous moment with the extra coworkers, and then Falk's character feeling the need to kind of shut it down and put a damper on things, and it's just
Yeah.
like the way these kind of nuances happen, and these character motivations come out in these very realistic, like undertoned ways. I think that's kind of
Yeah,
something Cassie
super.
was so good at.
hmm And when I saw that movie, it was like about around the same time I saw Seven Samurai, and I wrote a little bit of a mild comparison between the two because they both use these the camera and the frame to a very unique end.
Hmm.
I I see what's happening, and the way that it is this like bigger picture that's sort of slowly moving along, and you start to really catch on to every nuance and every point. Not even like just from a filmic lens, but from like the storytelling
Hmm.
in those movies. It grows a little bit on you, the exact depths of the characters. Like at first, like you could just say, "Oh, a woman under the influence is about a lady who's crazy or something," but that's not what it is about at all.
Hmm.
You know, you could say it's that based on like watching maybe like 2 minutes of it and dismissing it,
Hmm.
but you watch that movie, you get to know Gina Rollins, you get to know Peter Falk, and they both have serious issues, and they both have serious issues together, but in a way that like can't be expressed in a couple minutes.
Hmm.
Which is why, it's the same with Seven Samurai. You can look at Mifune's character in that, and he seems like a fool at times, but in the end, like you really think he's a man who the first word that comes to your mind eventually is just honor. You know, he seems like such an honorable, venerable person by the end of it. And you really see how much has changed. And that movie doesn't even take place over, you know, all this epic period of time, even though it's
Hmm.
so long. It takes place in like, I don't know, like a couple weeks.
Yeah.
It's not a very like uh giant story. It takes place all in a village, uh, for the most part.
Hmm.
Very insular, that movie, kind of, even though it's so big. It's a little bit of a contradiction inherently, but it's kind of one of the things that really pulls at you and makes that really kind of a more memorable movie because you feel a bit more insular, so you feel more at home with the characters.
Yeah.
But then when the action's happening, it does have this like epic sweeping feel.
Hmm. Well, and then even just what you said there, insular but so big, isn't that kind of what art is? Like, art is supposed to compress a variety of things from a person's lifetime to the history of humanity into like a 2 hour or an hour and a half time gap. You know, like it's all about
For sure.
microcosm. I think that's what's so interesting, and what like you started off with was just talking about art as an outlet of creativity, and it's kind of what I got into in the first episode of this podcast, where I talk about that for me. I guess I'll just run this by you to see like if this fits with what you're saying. Is that to me, art is about the preservation of insight, where you have gained these particular sensitivities to things through your own experiences in life, and then similar to how, like, say, a grandparent would tell a children a story so they could learn something that they don't have to go through those same experiences to now understand. That's what art is, where suddenly someone can understand these things about color, human relationships, a
Yeah.
variety of things, and then distill it into something that's widely palatable and can now reach beyond their smallness as an individual. You know. So does that kind of
For
fit with
sure,
like
yeah.
what you're saying? Or?
Yeah, for the most part, definitely fits the bill because and to jump off of that idea of art as being insular but so big. Like the idea of just an artist, somebody who creates art somehow. When you look at the spectrum of art and the grandness of the scope and potential of that scope, I mean, it's kind of amazing that there is just an artist there to create it.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of these bigger things take a lot of collaborators, and thus, in a sense, many artists. But one of the unique things, and one of the things that especially makes a film so like thrilling and full at times, is that if you really have more than one good artist there,
Hmm.
there's more than one like piece of art there, almost like that there's an art to a performance that could be separate from the art of the cinematography, this and that, which
Hmm.
may in a way you could argue that contradicts the idea of an auteur
Hmm.
as being the sole author of a film.
Hmm.
And I would say, I mean, that's kind of like the classic theory when people who don't really know much about film theory, they know the auteur.
Yeah.
And that's kind of me. I don't know a crazy lot about like hardline theory.
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I
me
know a
either.
bit
Yeah.
about criticism and history, but
Hmm.
uh, I'm off my own train of thought. But it's whatever I was gonna say. It's true.
For sure. Well, no, I think that's important to recognize about like the director as the auteur is that like we shouldn't consider they're the person doing everything. Like, of course, like there are people who can multitask
Yeah.
and stuff, but it's more that they're the coordinators. They're the people who make the decisions on who does what and all that. And ideally,
Yeah.
the
And it
people who
does depend. It's very important, depending on who the director is and what the point of the movie is, the vision there.
yeah
Some
no
directors are more like self-indulgent in a way,
hmm
and in a way that can be completely successful.
hmm
And some directors are more controlling and want to manage everything more,
hmm
while like and I have favorite filmmakers who are on the polar opposite sides of that. Uh, one of my favorite filmmakers is Robert Altman, and
hmm
his movies are extremely improvisational
hmm
and at times almost like a not really like a documentary, but sort of bending it. Uh,
hmm
one of his most famous movies is Nashville
hmm
from 1975, and it's a very like overall loose seeming project, but I mean, I'm sure you've seen the movie.
yeah
It ultimately does come together, and that's all fairly like grounded and makes sense.
hmm
And it's not like even though it does have moments that are a little bit more tragic and moments that are more comedic, moments that are more goofy, and even like the long extended song number, the musical numbers in the movie,
hmm
some of them are just like making fun of it, like that "For the Sake of the Children" song that
that's
Henry Gibson
that's
sings.
iconic.
It's literally like honestly, that song is disturbingly catchy,
Yeah,
and
that was the first
I've I
vinyl I
he-
ever bought. Was the soundtrack to Nashville? It was my first vinyl
oh, that's cool. The opening of that movie too is awesome. That like
with like
it's like a weird like trailer before the movie almost,
yeah, because it's like yeah, like
and and
the
and shows
commercial for the
the
album.
picture.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's just the beginning of the movie, and it kind of says everything.
yeah. No, for sure. And I think like in a way, like yeah, Altman did use like improvisational things, but that stuff, in order to create that environment such that like people open up in the way that he was able to get people to, and also to be able to
Oh,
coalesce all that stuff together into like a seamless product that does have like a flow to it. That requires like a strong command over things, and I think he was totally he was totally
oh,
into that.
for sure.
And so
And then,
yeah.
yeah, and that's why, like, if you watch an Altman movie, you're gonna watch it like an Altman movie. Like,
Hmm.
Gosford Park seems like it's a million miles apart from Nashville, but they both employ such a similar, like, feeling at times of
Hmm.
this. the famous like Altman zoom he'll still do.
Yeah.
His camera work often is like sometimes very wide and encompassing, and other times it really like just starts to hone in on something. It's not afraid of being a little bit spotty.
Hmm.
Same with Cassavetes.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's a really appealing thing of movies of that era too,
Yeah. Well, and
that they
that's
weren't really afraid to be spotty.
yeah, exactly. And well, and that's something I kind of talk about in the last episode was that a lot of media criticism now focuses on like was this good or bad cinematography, good or bad acting. But like conventionally those films aren't pretty like in like a like 2001 like ultra symmetry like kind of Kubrick sense,
Yeah,
but those they work perfectly for the style and sensibility those guys wanted to get across. So I think that makes them like absolutely effective.
yeah. And a huge thing about like, yeah, even though it's not like these aren't really like pretty shots, these aren't symmetrical shots, but in a sense, like you're really like seeing a thing happen, like just that huge like car uh accident
Yeah.
thing that happens where all those cars crash into each other, even though it's in the middle of an almost like documentary mood movie at times. That's
Mm.
such an obviously staged
Yeah.
moment, but it's not. It doesn't detract from it at all. It's funny, and it's like this is what happened. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just point out that something's ridiculous, and that's amazing.
Hmm.
That's why comedy exists. So you wouldn't say like usually if like Borat was in like fucking Schindler's List, like that would not usually pass as like a good performance, but it's an amazing performance in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think of Borat and Schindler's List, that's basically Jerry Lewis's Day the Clown Cried. So, I mean, there you go.
Yeah, fingers crossed that that finally comes out.
We'll get it. I know we will.
Yeah.
What an icon. Um, but, so, um, what was it? Oh, yeah, to go off the Altman thing, I just real quick, wanted to bring up one last thing is that you bring up, like, his kind of use of absurdism in that car crash scene. Like, well, maybe not absurdism, but, like, obviously some more crazy elements. And to think of the way he uses that, and
Yeah.
also in Brewster McCloud and Three Women, with three women, like, he manages to
Oh yeah.
perfectly
Three Women's
emulate. It's man, it's so good. Like holy shit. But like that film is a
Three
dream.
Women is crazy.
Yeah, it's so crazy
Yeah.
because he manages because of his way of just understanding the way things flow and like this kind of like accounting for the mercurial kind of like intangible things that can happen by not obsessively like
Yeah.
locking everything
Three
down.
Women somehow. Yeah. And like that's another movie where it's like you could say in ways uh the cinematography isn't conventionally like perfect
Hmm.
or whatever, but that's such a pretty experience. It's almost ethereal at times,
Yeah,
but at the same times like intimidating.
yeah.
Like those scenes at the beginning when you first see like Shelley Duvall working
Hmm.
with the old
Old
people
people,
in
yeah.
the and the like steamy water.
Hmm.
That's such a that's just one of the first things you see in that movie,
Hmm.
and it shouldn't be as creepy but enthralling
Hmm.
as it is. It's just a bunch of old people and Shelley Duvall, but it's kind of like I really need to see where this goes. Like, what am I witnessing here? Because there's something so foreboding about this, but so like faint and soft about some of the textures and these colors.
Hmm.
It, it, and that movie's like I don't know if I would call it funny, but I remember that guy at like who owns that.
The gun
He's at
range.
that like yeah, he's at that weird like abandoned gun range with the bar. That guy, that guy is he's funny, and I don't know like what I would think if I met a guy like that. Like I don't. It's just completely abandoned, without too much of an explanation, and it's just where he hangs out. Like what's the movie where he's just like there all day?
Yeah.
Because for the most part, and I don't know how he met Shelley Duvall,
Mhm.
and how he's meeting women like a few decades his senior. when he just does nothing. But yeah, like that's like so weird. But that is a guy out there.
Mhm.
Like there are people who just are in these bizarre circumstances.
I just wanted to have some conversations about some. I went through your ratings on Rate Your Music or Films, and I just thought I would just kind of go through some of them and just see how we can kind of hash these out. I don't
Oh,
know,
for sure.
figure out stuff. So, 1 star on the live action Scooby Doo movie. I need to know why. I gotta know why.
When I was a kid, I watched it. It made me very uncomfortable,
Weird. That's like
and
the
that's the main
opposite
thing I
for me.
remember about it.
This is so. I used to watch that film
I
obsessively.
Oh yeah, see, it made me feel like I was doing something wrong when I watched it
Maybe I,
at
you know what?
times.
Maybe I had a kind of
Like
similar feeling, but I
all
liked
the
that.
little like adult jokes in it. Like I knew they were like adult jokes, but I was like, someone's gonna get mad at me, which is weird because when I was like 12, I was like, I'm watching A Clockwork Orange now. But that something about that made me uncomfortable,
I
and
just
I was like really little.
Yeah. No, I just love
Although
how.
I looking back on it, and I actually watched it a few times. Part of me did like it. I was attracted to it. I don't know why it is so low, because looking back on it, the cast is really solid.
Right? That's what I
Uh,
was gonna say.
Really
Like,
perfect cast.
yeah. No, exactly. And it's just like it's just willingness to just be like the stupidest like thing that kids would like ever. Like it's just absolute commitment to the dumb gags and everything and everyone involved. I don't know. I
Mhm.
find those movies a
When
joy.
I was uh, when I was a kid, actually, I liked the second one a lot. I watched
Same.
that one a few times.
Same.
I
Yeah.
thought the second one was cool
Hell yeah.
because it had all the monsters and stuff, and I was like, "This is a great work of art right here."
Exactly. The fucking little skeleton dudes. Gotta love them. Okay, so
Hmm.
we've hashed out that. I gotta know 1 star on the first Rolling Stones album.
I mean, really, I like the Rolling Stones, but it was mostly like an album of covers that I sort of listened to. I mean, I've only heard it at most two times a long time ago.
Hmm.
I like Rolling Stones. I like when they're like I sometimes I like when they're doing ballads, and sometimes I like just the straight blues rock, but the really like early stuff didn't have like that sort of uh vigor that made it their stuff really more unique and stands out. But I
Hmm.
don't really know that much about the Rolling Stones. I haven't listened to too much of them.
Yeah.
So
No.
I couldn't say too much. 1 star is definitely harsh.
Hmm. Actually, that one
Uh,
might have been a 1.5. I think I might have misspoke there, but yeah, still.
it probably is, but it's fairly harsh rating.
Hmm.
But it is something that doesn't occupy my mental space ever,
Hmm.
too.
Yeah, it's just
So I
like,
don't really have much of a feeling about it.
and if it was like for like, was it 2 by 5? I think was another one, or some of their other early ones. I think like Rolling Stones #2 or whatever it's called. Those I think fit more there. But I just think, well, one Bo Diddley said that whoever plays guitar on Monet, it might have been Brian Jones. I can't remember. That he was the one guy who could actually replicate his guitar style, and I think it's a really I think all the covers on that album are really invigorating. And then you have "Tell Me You're Coming Back to Me," which I think is their best early kind of like pop, like not quite a ballad, but like pop song. I think it's just, like that's like an immaculate. That's one of their best singles. So yeah, I don't know. I have an affection for that album, so I just wanted to hash that. I just wonder if you had some like
Yeah. Well,
crazy
I'm sure
background
that
to it.
like no, I don't have like a huge like beef with them
Hmm.
because I'm sure like instrumentally it's very good
Hmm.
and fairly energetic.
Hmm.
I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, and for me, like
England's newest hitmate.
I think that album's cool in comparison. Even though I like them, but the early Beatles albums do feel very kind of like white boy rock, kind of like they're a lot poppier, a
Oh
lot more
yeah,
digestible.
definitely. A lot
Um,
of the reason why I would give like a Beatles album, early Beatles album, way higher than a Rolling Stones one,
mhm,
isn't even that I think it's better,
mhm.
but I have a long history with the beat. Like when that's
Yeah.
the first music I ever listened to,
Oh, same. Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
know like all those songs.
Yeah. And they're great albums. I'm just saying, like, I think it's cool to look at in context that, like, the
Mhm.
Rolling Stones are doing something way dirtier and, like, more, like, closer to
Mhm.
something that Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and all those guys were doing when rock was kind of rougher and like first around. So I just think for that reason it's kind of a cool album. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to hash that out. And then the last one, this one I'm really interested in here. Lolly shit chest flattener. I gotta know what's so objectionable about lolly shit chest flattener.
I just simply don't like that style of music.
Mm.
I thought it was very tasteless, frankly. Now
Mm.
I like tasteless stuff,
Mm.
but it sort of, you see, it wasn't so much that it's like, because musically there's some decent stuff about it.
Mm.
It's very chaotic
Mm.
and has this sort of crazy energy to it.
Mm.
But one of the main problems with it is it makes me deeply uncomfortable listening to it.
Mm.
It makes me feel like I'm a criminal listening to it,
Yeah.
and it didn't. It felt like it came from a bad place.
Yeah.
I mean, dancing around like the obvious.
Mm.
It's pretty funny to put it, but it does feel like it came from a place of not ethical feelings towards children,
Mm.
and I didn't enjoy that aspect. And I also thought it was kind of like half-assed way to be edgy and epic, and but it was really just kind of a mess. There's some very good like breakcore, niche IDM sub genre stuff out there
Mm.
that's really noisy and creative and heavy.
Mm.
It kind of felt like a failed attempt at emulating that in a way which also incorporated really embarrassing and upsetting corners of internet culture, which I just did not like.
Mm. Yeah. Well, like I have no objection about embarrassing or upsetting things because I think I don't know if someone's gonna explore them, someone should. But I can totally see because like I've listened to everything Lolly shit's done because I didn't. It was funny when I that was like when I first got into music when I was first like browsing /mu in like 2013 or whatever, and I was just
Yeah,
like,
no,
well,
literally,
I like anime, so I'll just listen to this,
yeah,
and I listened to the whole thing, and
yeah.
they go
I
deep.
listened to it fairly early too.
Hmm. But Lolly Show has this one album called "Little Girls on Drugs" that is genuinely one of the scariest things I've ever heard. It is so. Yeah, that's a freaky fucking album. So,
I'll listen to it. I am interested. I don't want to like accuse them of too much because I know it's sort of like tongue in cheek,
mhm,
and I do find it kind of funny. Sometimes, I mean, again, my rating for that is also pretty harsh,
mhm.
and my review is a lot less harsh
Oh, I
because it
didn't
was
see a
written a
review
couple
for
of
it.
years ago. I have a review for it that was written in 2018. It's not really a refined review.
Uh-huh.
But I said it wasn't really bad in my review, but
Okay.
I said it has its moments here and there, and that it wasn't impossible to listen to, but the potential that it had seemed to be kind of wasted, which
Sure.
probably is the more actual my opinion.
Hmm.
But I tried listening to it again. It was annoying me, so I was
Yeah.
like, screw this.
No, I feel ya. And if
Usually, if something's called like lollycore or like something core,
mhm.
and I just don't want to hear it sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just as a flip side, there are two albums that are kind of that style in terms of like taking this weird niche of like anime internet music and doing something more with it. Gore Shit's "My Love Feels All Wrong" is pretty good, and Hisu's it's got this long ass title of like "I love you when I was with you" and "I loved you when I missed you" or some shit like that. And actually, I've
I
talked to
might have listened to that.
yeah,
There's one that I've listened to that's really actually, even though it was like a lollycore album or something, it
yeah.
was like actually pretty good.
Yeah,
I
it was
actually
"You were
really liked
beautiful
one of
when I
them.
loved you, you're beautiful when I lost you" or whatever. That's it. I've talked to the
I
guy who
feel
made that.
like that. I feel like I must have heard it. I have an image in my head of what it is.
It's got the girl
Is
on
it
the
the one
beach
with? Oh, wait.
on the cover.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I have heard that.
awesome.
I do like that one.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, yeah. And I've talked to the because I
They
know
have
they.
another one. They have another one. You are special.
And
And
that's
that is
exactly
exactly
yeah,
why I
but
love it so
under
much.
the
That's a very good one.
under the pseudonym Made Assault, which actually the album cover for that I use as the profile picture on my AMV channel on Prostrate Constantly. Um,
Oh,
yeah, well, it's an edit I did for a cassette I made of it that I still have, um, and yeah, that person's cool. I've talked to him a bit. Um,
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, their stuff's pretty good. If you're gonna do that kind of music, then I do like it, it's a bit more. It feels a bit more high spirited, sort of trying to. Yeah, I really liked
mhm.
that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and like they're cool. They're cool people. Um, what else do I got here? Well, I guess it's that time of me. We're gonna have the infamous Zane 2001 conversation because I noticed that that's one of your favorite movies, and that's a movie I've had trouble
I
engaging with. Um,
truly.
so I'd like
Oh,
to,
all right.
I'd like to start off with if you want to talk about what you find that movie that does like, or what is that like? What do you find exceptional about it? I want to know.
Okay. Well, again, the way I do look through art, some of it is quite personal.
Mm-hmm.
So I did see that movie early age, because I heard about it in like a book,
Mm-hmm.
which talked about the HAL 9000 computer, and I was like, this sounds like an epic movie where there's some suspenseful stuff that's gonna happen. It's gonna be exciting. And then
Mm-hmm.
the first like 2 minutes, 3 minutes of the movie is a black screen with,
The
weird
orchestra.
modern classical music, yeah, playing. And I didn't like that. I was like 6, so I didn't enjoy that. And then it was like the Bump Monkeys for like 20 minutes, and I didn't like that as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I eventually liked it, but when I was 6, I was like, I want to see the computer.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was a bunch of stuff in space for like another 20 minutes. And then my mom was like, it's like 8 o'clock. You have to go to bed, Josh. We can't finish it.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a good opinion on it at first. But when I grew up to be 10 years old, I actually started to like the movie. I enjoyed the monkeys then, and I enjoy them very much now. And I think it really has lasted with me all these years since I was like 10. And I think it is very profound, but in a way which does not speak. And I enjoy its refusal to really speak to you in a way which is sort of normal, functional, man to man language. It's very, very much an opera, but not with a regular conflict, not with the regular set of characters. Really, what it is witnessing ideas sort of grow over time, and it is something that is worth analyzing and looking into. But one of the main things also is really just the environment of that movie, being able to be there uh, in space, even if you don't really know these characters well, uh, encountering what they encounter is something astounding to capture in a way that I think that it was captured. Like like rarely is a movie about space and these incredible things happening. Rarely does it really communicate to the same way the importance and power of those moments and shimmers onto the completely unfathomable, inexplicable events uh, that are possible out there beyond the world. It is a movie that is beyond what we normally consider. It's sort of beyond the menial conflicts of our lives, and it's sort of the ultimate epic story. And even as somebody who doesn't watch a lot of those like ultimate epic stories, I mean, it just feels so much more important and so much more grand and magnificent because it is about something so much bigger to us all and something that couldn't just be simply written down, even though Arthur C. Clarke, God bless his soul, wrote the novelization and wrote many more books afterward. The novels are good, but there's something about the movie where sort of the only way you could have really communicated the magnitude of what was experienced.
All right. Yeah, no, like, and that's an interesting way to put it. Like I'm just thinking from, like, it's funny we kind of started from the same perspective where I saw it really young. Like I was like 10 or something, or really young when I first saw it. And I watched it and I was just bored and I didn't get anything from it. And I didn't know what was happening, but I never really had another moment where it clicked. Like I would think about things in the movie and be like,
Mm.
"Oh, that was cool," and then when I went to revisit it, I just left frustrated because I just found nothing to latch onto for me. Maybe because I'm a person who finds it hard to think beyond individual terms. Like I find it much easier to connect with
Hmm.
singular personalities,
Oh yeah.
characters in a way, and so I find that movie hard to
See,
connect with.
yeah, that's definitely.
And
Well, an interesting thing is that is a movie which does not have a person to click with. It
mhm.
doesn't really have that. Even though I do think in many ways it's a deeply human movie, and eventually you have to click on to somebody by the end. It's not really a movie that's about like a couple people doing something. It's this really grand like insane thing. It's like holding this giant orb of pure energy and forcing somebody to stare into it for 2.5 hours. It's
But
kind of like that, and in some ways that is truly, truly, truly like the most almost orgasmic sort of like explosion of color and genius and miracle. And in other ways, it's just going to turn you blind. So it's not for everyone.
yeah, I just well, cause like I have that feeling of orgasmic sort of feeling of understanding when I watch something like Buffalo 66 or One from the Heart, where these are films that relate to personal principles on a way that I can
Hmm.
immediately latch on to these grounded insights into human behavior, into things that I can
Yeah.
think about the next day and maybe the rest of my life about what do I want to do, like what can I do with my limited
Hmm.
time on this earth to be meaningful. But with 2001, I think in the way
Yeah.
we were talking about art earlier as a way to preserve personal insight into things that you've experienced and stuff, to me, I think the kind of clinical style of 2001 and its broad way of engaging with humanity in this as like this like collective, like this mass. I just find it.
Hmm.
I can't parse it. I can't engage with it that way because I don't
Yeah.
see what Kubrick experienced or what anyone involved experienced in order that they're preserving that I can internalize to my life and worldview.
That is fair. I would say that one of the things it is actually trying to make some kind of an insight on. I mean, it's a little bit hard to even perfectly articulate, which is actually like what seems to be detracting you is one of the things that kind of makes it attractive to me,
Mm,
which is that it just is one of the only movies I can really just say it transcends just grounding something. It goes above and beyond the ground, and it just looks. And if you just like completely remove yourself from it, it's almost more forgiving on you, or more not even forgiving, but more palatable.
mm,
Yeah, that is true. Like part of what you do see in art and what you really value in it will be in a way challenged, in another way just kind of like discarded. And
mm,
that is kind of like a stressful thing to have to deal with. And that is why it is a movie that sort of causes a lot of argument. Oh, and it is kind of surprising that it has the kind of reach it does.
mm,
But I think one of the main reasons it does have that reach is that not only is it technically like a really, really like, regardless of your feelings emotionally, really like well crafted, well produced picture and a spectacle.
mm,
Uh, but the cool thing about it is you see these different events, and what you have to connect to is more this eye, this observer, which is completely anonymous. It does sort of force you to separate yourself from your ideas of yourself and kind of make you see the universe as not the universe experienced by me or by someone I know or somebody I don't know, but the universe just as it is and as it grew, and sort of technology and communication as they grew and why they grew, and sort of asking these things like, really, what is out there and what would it be like to look into the face of something which is inconceivable according to our minds. And so, in some ways, it is this unique and elaborate thought experiment. And in other ways, it's just this pure experiment. It's just, look, wash this vision over you, even if it is scatterbrained at times, even if it is meanderingly slow. There's, I would say, even though it is kind of void of that really like superhuman warm touch that one would want. It does have a personality to it. It does have a playfulness to it with the classical music playing over the really like advanced, spectacular creations of mankind juxtaposed against the spectacular feats of space and that are just naturally there, and how really at the end of the day what has already been can't really be outmatched by something made by man, something artificial, you know. So even though it doesn't really have that human element there, more than anything, it does kind of argue for it and sort of look at what we already have and kind of fawn over it in a
Mm-hmm.
weird way. Like it is kind of like a statement, not necessarily against technology, but sort of almost making fun of technology by the end, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
with the last stretch being content that is unfathomable to human beings and very abstract and very out of the bounds of what a human could comprehend and what a person could make. It's not a spaceship that's really spectacular at the end of the day, even though we marveled at that. Really, what changes everything and what makes Hal 9000 seem so puny in comparison because he's ultimately, vanquished, uh, are these completely cosmic psychedelic explosions of what's always been, what always will be, what will outlast everything. And that's kind of something that will, if it clicks, seem like the most important possible concept in the moment. And that's why, with the people it does click with, there are so many people who will insist it's the best movie of all time because it does do that in a way. It does make you realize how puny you are in a way which kind of makes you appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I'm glad you're willing to take the time to actually like hash out all these ideas and stuff because that was my most frustrating thing about the movie was that I would go and read the reviews from people and they would all talk about what a mind blowing experience it was. It was like they were all in on this thing that I didn't get, where it was just like everyone just talking about like just saw it in IMAX, best experience of my life, and that's it. And then it has like 2,000 likes, and it's like, well, you're not. What is? No one's talking about the movie. They're just talking about like
Yeah.
their awe at this thing, and I just like I that was my frustration with it, and I
Which,
was. Mm,
although it is frustrating, it is
mm,
kind of fitting for it to have that existence because, like, your average person, if they see that and it does click, they're not going to be putting it into all these long-winded words. Uh, it does kind of just have this like, oh my God, what is this that I just watched? Like, it seems mind-blowing, but to me it really blows all the senses. I mean, it's heart-blowing. I think it's very beautiful.
okay, yeah, no, absolutely, I can see it.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting what you said about the I would assume like you mean like the alien influence, the monolith, all this stuff being about the stuff that the thing that has always been intangible and will be here throughout humanity regardless of what and my qualms regarding its ideas about artificial intelligence aside, dealing with what the movie presents, it's like it's about how we transcend our material existence and all that, and achieves some sort of transcendence, which is great. And that's why I think its influence on Uncut Gems makes it, because Uncut Gems is one of my favorite films, and I think what that film
Oh, mine
communicates.
too. Love Uncut
Yeah,
Gems.
no, it's phenomenal. And Josh Safdie in the interview says that 2001 was a huge touchstone for him, and I didn't understand why. But now I'm starting to connect what you're saying to what the what Uncut Gems does, because with Uncut Gems' beginning and end, panning through the opal into and out of Howard, it's saying that Howard is this opal, and I think its argument in the film, and in that way to tie it to 2001, is that to be the inspiration, to be the a piece of iconography in the way Howard is, as someone who just with reckless abandon would go for these massive risks with big reward. He is sowing this inspiration that will last forever, in the same way the opal is passed down throughout history as this totem that eventually reaches Kevin Garnett,
Yeah.
and provides this immense inspiration. So in that way, you achieve immortality and go on forever. So now I can see those parallels now between 2001 and Uncut Gems. And with Uncut Gems, it's something that I can internalize to me as an individual. And so maybe maybe engage with 2001 through that lens may help me with it somewhat. But
Yeah. And again, obviously Uncut Gems is about a guy, it's about a character. And that's a little bit easier to immediately connect with. Because 2001 A Space Odyssey, like, yeah, there's the conflict with Hal, but that doesn't happen until,
like
I
two
mean,
hours in or
around,
something.
not, yeah, it happens, deep into the movie.
Yeah.
It's not really, the only thing that happens. There's so much context put before it, and it's a lot of it does just sort of speak in metaphors. It just speaks in a separate tongue. But by the end of it, uh, ideally, you would have uh, sort of a picture as to what you just experienced, and an idea as to why it all comes together and why you feel the way you do by the end of it. In some ways, 2001 is very honest, but it's honest in a way which feels almost wooden at times and kind of frustratingly cryptic at times, or just standoffish. Like if 2001 was a person, they'd barely talk to you, and you'd probably feel uncomfortable around them half the time. But if you did get to talk to them, it would kind of be awesome. They'd really say a lot of important stuff.
Sure, yeah. And I think, I was just thinking of the way I engage with characters. Uh, I think an interesting flip side is D.W. Griffith's Intolerance, which is kind of, in a lot of ways, a precursor to 2001, where Intolerance deals with the entirety of human history, drawing parallels between all these different time periods and showing about love's struggle throughout the ages, about in the way love is this motivating force for all these people to accomplish these great things and fight against these great evils. And that's a film I connect greatly with, and see this massive importance. I think it's just the fact that 2001 deals with deals with, I don't fucking know. I mean, I guess 2001 deals with
It
more.
deals with a space, I guess. Space, sort of.
Yeah.
And space in a couple ways. Space is in, space between characters, space, uh, spatial awareness in a literal sense, and outer space. And it is, a space odyssey. And
Yeah, I just.
it's funny because you would think if it's an odyssey, you immediately think of the Odyssey, which is a pretty clear through line, a hero's journey, and that's not what 2001: A Space Odyssey is like at all.
Yeah,
And
well,
you
even
and what you
though
can
like
gauge from
Bowman's
part
path
of what you
kind of
could,
parallels in some ways, but again, that's not what the movie's kind of
yeah,
central thing is.
yeah, yeah, the whole a 2001: A Space Odyssey as a whole, just looking at it, it is a space odyssey. It's not a human odyssey. It's not the Odyssey as we would understand it. It's not a hero's journey from the perspective of a human hero. It's from the perspective of fucking space. So it is a completely different wavelength. It's just not as relatable in a lot of
Yeah,
ways, but
no, and I think
real big.
yeah, I think to be like kind of hippy dippy catchphrasey about it, 2001's about outer space, and I'm about inner space, like a canned lyric
Oh, damn, dude.
of delay.
Yeah.
But that's what like I think like Evangelion is a show about inner space and like finding some sort of kind of cosmic significance within the self, like the way it breaks apart in the last few episodes.
Yeah.
And so I just find it way easier. Like for me, the last 2 episodes of Evangelion are like the most immediate. Like I've wanted to see this like made, but I haven't made it myself. Stuff ever like. And it's just so immediate with me. I know a lot of people have trouble with that. Whereas 2001 is the opposite. It's just like I just can't connect with it. And I think that's just the differing in sensibilities there.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned one movie that, and I might have to go kind of soon.
Oh, sure.
Like, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes.
Sure, yeah.
But you did mention a movie which I watched again very recently, and I would say I'm a huge fan of now. Buffalo 66. I watched that again the other day.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it is a movie that deserves discussion, for sure. That is, and it's really good, too. And, I mean, what can you say about Mr. Gallo that hasn't already been said? He's maybe one of the most, and I don't mean this in an entirely positive way, but he's a pretty incredible person, and in some ways unpredictable, very self-destructive too, and that's kind of really reflected in the movie. Even though there's a lot of like self-love there, you know, that people always like to comment on. It's not. The reason why it doesn't just come across as like pure hubris is it's not really that. It's sometimes Vincent Gallo doesn't really seem to like that he is the way he is, but he doesn't really want to be bothered by, you know, people's BS because he doesn't think it will really change too much. And Buffalo 66 felt like a really good way of channeling a lot of his inner like pain and disappointment in himself and the way everything turns out for him. And it does seem to like just straight up make fun of his character at times. And I think he would not admit that even. It'd be like, no, I'm fucking great in the movie, and it's all great. But I don't think he would.
No, I don't know. I think he
maybe.
Well,
but I don't
you
think
heard
he
the
would
Brown
mean
Bunny
it as a
commentary. He thinks he think himself as a character is a very laughable thing. I don't know. I think. I mean, Buffalo 66 changed my life, and I became deeply obsessed with Gallo. And
Gallo's interesting because one of the things I like about him though is that when I think of like, because I'll have like long, like theories about stuff, and he's one of the main filmmakers who, if anybody, if he heard like any of the shit I think about his movies, I feel like he would tell me to fuck off, and I really kind of like that about him, like. Because honestly, yeah, but at the same time, no. And I think he understands all that, which makes it a lot more compelling. But he communicates in his own way. That's very, you know, when applied to art especially, super effective.
Yeah,
and Brown Bunny really good too.
Well, yeah, because he is super airtight, which is funny because there's so much misinterpretation about his films, but if you really look into them, every single element serves a central purpose and is all going towards these metaphors that he wants to apply in the broadest senses.
Buffalo 66 is really like, that's a movie that feels very efficiently made, like really like serves a purpose every moment to moment, really in a successful way.
Yeah.
And a lot of the scenes sort of parallel each other, pay off, and it's also really so funny.
Yeah, no, it's
really good,
funny.
And Gallo's character is so funny
Billy Brown.
times, and sometimes he's being like, sometimes it's like he's being such an asshole that it's funny. Sometimes he's genuinely pretty funny.
Yeah,
and it was like, it is a movie I find pretty relatable.
Well, of course, yeah. Well, that's the whole point of the movie is to capture the complexes that have only become more relevant as times went on of being stuck in this image of a kid and also a victim. Like, and I feel like those
Yeah.
complexes have just spread and spread, and Buffalo 66 has just gained in relevance in that way.
And like, it's kind of like a cheesy thing to be like, this movie's about masculinity.
Mm.
But Buffalo 66 is one of the main movies I've seen which really talks about masculinity in like a way that like there are multiple times in which Vincent Gallo says like fairly aggressively like, "Don't look at me."
Yeah.
And I just think that's kind of like a big trait of what can make masculinity such a hot button topic is that in a lot of ways, the way masculinity has been uh, used throughout history is kind of a tug of war of the self, where you really want to be admired, but at the same time, you don't want that. I don't
Like the
know exactly how to
vulnerability
put
that
it.
comes with that.
Yeah, like there's a lot of vulnerability with that, and you want people to know because it's really there with you, but at the same time, you can't let people look. You can't let people see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost sort of a brave movie because it seems like, Gallo would be fairly touchy on that and
Mm-hmm.
through some of his like intentionally almost arrogant statements
Mm-hmm.
uh, in the past, like sort of try to stabilize that. But
Mm-hmm.
really, the act of both of his films feel really not only self-critical and also like super insular and about a person and really in a way that's like actually relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Even people who like really want to shit on Gallo all day and call
Mm-hmm.
him a bad guy and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like, there like I've read shit that he said and I've been like, this is like terrible to say. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, but
Yeah.
like, but I can't say that he's all one way or another way because you look at the art and it has those nuances, and even just looking at his face, he at once he seems like he's really sure of himself and really confident, and at the same time he seems like he doesn't know where the fuck he is, and he just wants to get home and he wants to get back to some place that's perfectly safe and makes sense to him,
Yeah.
and it's sort of reflected in his relationship with, he calls him Goon, that guy on the phone.
Yeah.
His thing with him is kind of like Vincent Gallo, and you realize eventually, like, he kind of does feel for Rocky, he does like him
Mm-hmm.
by the end before he's about to do the undoable deed.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he has to reverse that right afterwards, which is very funny.
Yeah.
Uh, but you see, like, he really likes him, and it's kind of just a weird, like, I don't know, reenactment of him trying to almost be a father figure to this character, but at the same time being a dick to him and being his friend and being there for him, but in a way where he's just likes bossing him around
Mm-hmm.
and insulting him because that's just kind of what he understands,
Mm-hmm.
is this sort of bossing around and being really quiet, but being a person. And
Mm-hmm.
then, his dad in the movie, played by
Ben
my man,
Gazzara,
Ben Gazzara,
the
great
man.
actor.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and he's great in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Fools rush
that's
in.
another super. Oh my God, that scene is beautiful.
Yeah.
And then right after, he's just like,
No more.
no, yeah, and that line delivery kills.
Yes, so good. Like, oh,
Uh,
what a
but
legend.
but after such like a tender moment, that's really a pretty good encapsulation of that movie,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like Gallo will give you something really beautiful and vulnerable and honest about himself,
Mm-hmm.
and then he'll just yell at you and spit in
Yeah.
your face
Well,
because
that's Gallo's
it's
father.
scary.
That's actually Vincent Gallo's dad singing the song that's on that The Fools Rush In. That's actually
Oh,
Vincent
that's
Gallo
really
singing it.
cool.
Yeah, it's so great. um, but yeah, no, like I totally see what you're saying about that and everything. I think an interesting about the relationship with Goon in that movie is that Billy needs someone with a relationship that is so fundamental, like a very basic. It's like to use a cringe kind of trope, but a tsundere. It's you create this
Yeah, no,
absolutely
true.
basic like antagonization relationship just so you can get close to someone, and so there's no nuance, there's no subtext. It's just absolutely understood what's going on, and yet then suddenly everything becomes nuance and subtext because you care for each other, but you're locked in this like Tom and Jerry kind of routine.
For sure.
So yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's something that's beautiful there.
Also, can't mention that movie without Miss Christina Ricci. Very,
Oh,
very good in that movie,
oh my
and
God, yeah,
very beautiful woman.
yeah.
And she's great in Speed Racer too. Check out Speed Racer.
Yeah, I went on a huge Speed
Dude, I
Racer
watched Speed
diatribe.
Racer again recently.
Yeah.
Dude, that movie's really also another movie which actually is in a way about art in a very beautiful way.
Yeah.
Uh, Legit great movie. And
Absolutely.
yeah, Christina Ricci's so good. Clap for her, everybody at home. Great lady, and
Yeah.
uh, you
Imagine
know,
being Vincent
really
Gallo.
good career. She's not.
I was gonna say,
Imagine
imagine.
being Vincent Gallo though, because
Well,
he is
that.
kind of what he said about her after that. Honestly,
Well,
is probably the stuff that's made me the most annoyed with him.
well, but no, okay.
Because
I know, I understand, and he was being his classic, like, I'm going to be the Republican stereotype and get mad at women. But in his defense, she was a big part of the movie not receiving distribution because she was one of the big name stars in it, and she absolutely refused to do any promotion for it. So there's some justification there, but regardless of that,
yeah,
I,
the
I,
main
I
thing is
wasn't
I
just
don't
trying
like
to
that he
turn it
called her
back to.
fat.
He called her
No,
fat too.
legit, my main criticism is that he called her fat, which, one, no, and two, come on, dude.
But hey,
Like, legit,
it's him being a
imagine being
singer.
with Christina Ricci. He is in character, of course, but
Yeah.
it's a character that's intentionally inflammatory, and that's one thing where we can't be saying this about Miss Ritchie in this film, Gallo.
It's true, but I was gonna say I wasn't just trying to turn the conversation back to Gallo. I was gonna say, imagine being Vincent Gallo and seeing like a 12-year-old Christina Ricci, or however old she is in the Addams Family, and being like, he went and saw the movie 5 times. He was so obsessed with her, and was like, I need her in my movie, and she was like fucking 12. What a fucking icon!
Oh boy, dude, that is a Gallo move.
It's a Gallo
And then to
moment.
be like, she's fucking fat in my moves. Like, come on, man. Come on,
Well,
Gallo.
no,
But
he's never
damn, a
denied.
solid ass cast, by the way, though.
Yeah, well, a
Solid
solid ass
cast
cast
in that
where he
movie.
hates. Well, I think he only hates Ricci and Angelica Houston, but still. But he's never besmirched
So
Ricci.
all the women, all
It's
the
true.
women,
It's
which
true.
honestly, another perfect character
Well,
moment for
well,
Gallo.
actually, he liked the I forget
Although
which
I think he
Arquette was in
does.
it. He liked the Arquette that was in it. He had was a big fan of her, but that's all I know.
Oh yeah,
Who plays
Roseanne
Wendy
Arquette is
Balsam?
great too.
Yeah,
She's the ultimate Pulp Fiction girl, by the way.
I can see
I'm
it.
I'm gonna stand by that. People go all goo goo gaga for Miss Uma Thurman, but I think Roseanne Arquette is, uh, I not even like in like a horny way, just very like has just a cool like thing going for her in that movie,
She
even though she's in a very short time.
she's the like
That
that
whole
that was fucking trippy chick, right? Isn't that what she says? Is that her?
Yeah, she has all the piercings.
Yeah, yeah,
She's
yeah.
the one who has all the piercings. Then John Travolta's like, "There's a bitch with all this shit on her face." And he goes, like, "That's my
Oh,
wife."
yeah. Was it
That's
Pam?
my favorite stretch of that movie.
That's so good.
That's a really,
And that's from a
yeah,
story that actually came from Martin Scorsese's American Boy. They actually that whole heroin sequence is actually a story from the gun dealer from Taxi Driver's life that he just told. It's a weird thing. But I was gonna say
damn, that's
Pam
cool.
Grier was supposed to play that role, but when Tarantino started thinking about
Hey,
it, he was like, no one's gonna fucking talk back and talk shit to Pam Grier, so now we gotta get a weaker chick to
yeah,
play this role. I think it worked.
Pam Grier, another cool lady.
So
I'm gonna give some positive reviews to the ladies today.
hell yeah, shout out to the
Shout
ladies.
out, shout out Christina Ricci. Shout out Roseanne Arquette. Shout out Pam Grier. If you ladies want to talk, I'm sorry, I'm taken. I can't. But
I know they're
uh,
big on the Articulating Film podcast, so we'll rain check that for today, I
yeah.
guess, ladies. Uh,
But Robert Forster is in Jackie Brown.
yeah,
Robert Forster,
that
really
guy,
underrated actor. Love him.
fucking icon.
He's
And
in
Mulholland Drive too.
big part of Twin Peaks: The Return,
Really?
and he's one of my favorite parts. Yeah,
Didn't he
he
die
plays.
recently?
He died recently, almost right after it was all done airing. He's amazing in it. I love him so much in that show.
Oh
He
man, that's
doesn't
right.
have like these super big dramatic scenes, but he just has this like warmth to him, and just looking in his eyes, there's so much there. He's really great in it.
Yeah, no,
And he's a
absolutely.
big part of it. He's one of the main characters.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, because I mean, like what Forrest
Yeah.
does to Jackie Brown's immaculate, and I'd love to see what he can pull off in Lynch's style. That'd be
Hmm.
so cool, especially with how kind of deadpan he is. Um, Anyway, because I know you see you had to go soon, I just wanted to do one last thing. There is one question I wanted
Of
to
course.
kind of talk about because I've kind of been into it recently. I've been into this
Yes.
notion that the perfect is the enemy of the good, but in a flipped way to what I think people might interpret that as in if you spend your whole life trying to whittle away at something to make it like this perfect little thing, you're gonna miss a lot of what you could have happened with, like what to talk about Altman earlier and Castlevania and stuff like that, in terms of making something bigger and good, like making something good instead of whittling away at what's comfortable and safe,
For
instead
sure.
extending yourself and making something good in that way. So, do you have any thoughts on like that sort of process?
It's actually good advice for me that I think the universe is trying to give because really the main thing that has hindered my progress through writing and stuff
Mm.
is me being overly like judgmental on my every last word
Yeah.
and trying to make it so, it doesn't like I don't know. But,
Mhm.
I do like to follow that motto and I do believe it pretty well.
Mhm.
Even though revisions are necessary, but only in
Oh
the
yeah.
way where it's like not to make it perfect, it's to make it cohesive and
Yeah.
whole. That's why like a lot of people will like I never besmear something by saying that it's incoherent.
Mhm.
But the worst thing something can be is like incohesive. I
Yeah.
love cohesion and when everything sort of clicks even if it's disparate.
Yeah, and like we were just talking about, like with Lynch and stuff, and even with like some like Three Women, those are things people would call like weird, surreal kind of sprawling movies, and yet nothing in those movies
Hmm.
feel out of place because it all follows this internal logic, and I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Like even when it is out of place, that's important. That's something really like powerful.
Hmm.
That's something, the original like French surrealists were obsessed with juxtaposition.
Yeah.
And juxtaposition is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the things that's so alluring to me. And especially about Blue Velvet. And right before I go, I guess I'll just like say one thing about Blue Velvet and
Hmm.
then I'll probably have to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's this one scene in Blue Velvet, and it's a little bit of a spoiler again.
I think people have seen
So
Blue Velvet. I think we're
I
okay.
know, I know people have seen Blue Velvet, but if somebody hasn't, this is a great scene, so you
Yeah.
gotta wait.
Skip to the
But
timestamp on
in Blue
screen. Yeah.
Velvet, dude, in Blue Velvet, there's a sequence where uh, Jeffrey Beaumont is with Laura Dern's character Sandy. They're in the car. I think it's right after they went to the prom
Hmm.
and had the dance, and they're being chased by a car, and they think that it's Frank. So Jeffrey steps on it. The music gets all intense, and for a moment you do think it's Frank, and then it's revealed to be Sandy's ex-boyfriend, who technically she's been cheating on him with uh, Jeffrey Beaumont.
Hmm.
And so he's there with his friends, and they're all like wasted and trying to beat up Jeffrey, and everyone's out the car. And then you're watching like this sort of like this would be like a conflict maybe in an early Twin Peaks episode, sort of like teenage angst kind of petty fight. And then you see Dorothy Valance naked, beat up, bruised on his lawn,
Yeah.
walking sort of like almost like a Night of the Living Dead character out from the shadows. And for a second, it doesn't register to any of the characters. And one of the kids who's drunk is like, "Oh, is that your mother? Is that your mother, Jeffrey?" Which, I mean, we can talk about the Oedipus complex all day and how it has to do with that movie.
Yeah.
But beyond that, that's like then he really sees how like beat up and bruised she is. It registers that she's completely nude and needs shelter, help,
Hmm.
call an ambulance. And he gets quiet and he's like, "I'm really sorry." And everyone it's like that's a really, really striking image, and I think speaks about what the movie's about just as well as those beetles under the grass.
Yeah.
Just this moment of a little minor dispute, in a suburban town, and then you just see like what's really going on in the world, just the consequences of this burden of, when it boils down to it, at least in Lynch's world, is evil.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's a great little microcosm for the flick, and yeah, I mean, I think that's a great place to leave the podcast off. So if you got anything you want to plug,
For sure.
any sort of like YouTube thing you're still uploading to, or anything where you're still posting stuff, you want to mention that here? You can...
I mean, I will post to YouTube whenever. I mean, I guess I'll just say the name of my Rate Your Music account is framptonhollis. Framptonhollis. Experimental filmmaker named Hollis Frampton. It's kind of his name backwards, sort of. But and then I have a YouTube channel called The Prankster, and I don't really use it too much now, but I'll probably make stuff when I have a camera again. And I have 2 Instagram accounts, and they're both sort of themed. One of them is called Gang David Lynch on IG, and one of them is called ween.swag. And those are my 2 accounts.
Hell yeah.
On Instagram. And they're pretty, they're not like super successful, but I'm sort of integrating myself into little niche communities. But I don't talk to any of them. It's funny.
It's a tough journey, but yeah, I'll link all those in the description in case you're interested. And yeah, I think we're good here. Thanks so much for coming on and willing to talk all this stuff.
Well, thanks for having me.
Oh hell yeah, man! It was
I love talking. So
yeah, no, because I was worried.
It's kind
I was
of a
just
good format.
Yeah, I was worried because I was like, what if I get this guy on and he just doesn't want to talk, like doesn't want to say anything, and then right off the bat you were just boom, and I was like, hell yeah, this will work.
Oh yeah, dude.
All right, well.
Yeah, no, I talk to myself, and I talk when I'm with like my girlfriend and people. I mean, she can attest. I can talk for a long time. But I don't. But somehow I eventually say the right thing, and I can pace it. So that's really the important lesson that we want to take away from this is whatever I don't really remember.
It's the perfect being the enemy of the good. You can talk a lot, and as long as you can make it cohesive, that's what matters, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I won't keep you any longer. Tune in to the Articulating Insight podcast next time, and yeah, thanks for watching.
Your whole world is black. No more will my green seagull turn a deeper blue. I could not foresee this thing happening to you.